যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. I hope you all are having a good time, and I hope the audio is coming fine, right? Yeah, it is. So, I saw the notification. Yeah, it's on Christmas. Yes, we are doing a live stream with Professor Salvatore Babones. We'll be discussing his book Dharma and Democracy, or yeah, it's called Dharma Democracy, which is yet to release in India. It's available on the Indian Amazon, but it's the Australian edition, which is a little costlier. I think you all should buy it regardless. I haven't asked him when the Indian edition will be available. I saw one yesterday. It said the hardback copy is here, but it wasn't available. So I guess you are supposed to pre-order maybe. I'll have to ask him these things. So today, what I'm mainly going to do for the rest of the evening and night are those study companion Pomodoro technique, study along, work along live streams. Okay. So before that, I thought, okay, since I've had such a gigantic gap in live streaming, how can I make a comeback with just study along? So let's discuss some constructive stuff, some concrete stuff. So I thought let's react to a Salvatore Babones video only, if he has any new interview regarding the book. Because we had checked out one talk and debate by him, remember, in Australia in some think tank, where one BBK NRI was asking him some very strange questions that why aren't you critical enough of India, etc. Do you even know India, bro? So then I found that there's an insane amount of interviews that Salvatore Babones has given in Western media regarding India and the book Dharma Democracy. Holy shit. I think I'll do a live reaction of all of those videos, because he's a very legit, credentialed, well-meaning and dispassionate and as much as humanly possible to be unbiased. He's unbiased, and he's a very knowledgeable sociologist to look up to. So why not check out every instance of him defending India in the West. Okay. Salmander's the on India. I'm enjoying foreigners crying about Messi. Oh, acha. Finally, about Corbe study. Yeah, Neon. Today, that's the main point. I need to do the study along as soon as possible, because on 25th, Professor Babones is coming on the podcast. On 26th, legendary veteran journalist Jaggi Bhasanji is coming on my podcast, and I have their books with me. Professor Salvatore Babones' book, at least I have gone through to a large extent, skimmed through almost the entirety, but I'm yet to read it properly, completely. And Jaggi Bhasanji's book I haven't yet begun to read. So I need to complete both of them by 25th. And on 26th morning, I have a recording to attend. A song that I'm arranging for a client, for a vocalist. She has composed a song. She'll be singing it. So I have to attend the recording. And so I need to do that song arrangement. I'll probably start the arrangement tomorrow and read these two books completely by 25th and 26th. So by the way, this is Jaggi Bhasan's book. It's a fictional novel on an Indian prime minister. Okay, I'll tell you all about the book later on, of course. And him being a legendary veteran journalist, I'm sure he knows some stuff that he cannot say or speak about publicly. So probably he passes all those off as fiction. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to asking him this question the most. And okay, another very important thing. There's someone called Jatayu. It's a pen name who contributes regularly on Swarajya, writes reviews for all the top quality, top notch, the most respectable uh, nationalist, pro Hindutva sort of books that come out these days. He writes reviews for them, and as well, he's a columnist as well. Okay, his name is Jatayu. He writes on Swarajya and I think elsewhere as well. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting him and getting introduced to him as part of our ashram retreat in Chinmay Vibhuti in Pune. Okay, he's also part of that group, Smart, of which I am also a part. Wait, now I can't tighten this nice little friendship band, slash band that my friend Shaib gave me from that 1300-year-old Hindu temple in Bali. Yeah, I have managed to put this on. So we got to talking about caste. Of course, no surprise there. And he has insane knowledge on Shastras foremost, first and foremost. But that didn't surprise me all that much because, okay, a Tamil Brahmin guy, Hindutvadi, if he is not expert on Shastras, who else will be? So later on, the speech, remember I told you all about um, the speech about my reflections on the experience in Chinmay Vibhuti, where I said that I was trying to reconcile Friedrich Nietzsche's love for Hinduism with his hatred for religion. So he congratulated me extra personally, and said that if someone brings up Friedrich Nietzsche in such a place, in such a context, that says something about you. Then we had long walks up and down those hills where we did those live streams, and then we got to talking about caste, Hindutvadi scholars. He said that he has met many Hindutvadis recently, young content creators. So many of them are insanely dumb, etc. I still did not know why was he calling them dumb, and was some sort of impressed with me, etc. Then I realized that his reading, let's say, scope is insane. That being an expert in Shastras is just a small portion of his knowledge and reading base. Okay. Then he starts recommending me that legendary, now legendary book, A Dharmic Social History of India by Aravindan Neelakandan. Okay. So, which you all have been recommending me for months now, which I haven't simply had the chance to get to because there are so many other pending books, and I'm not spending any more money on books anymore because I need to first finish the books, and besides some other books that I'm getting for free anyway. Then he says that he has made Aravindan Nilkandan has recently made some criticism against RSS as well, for letting in some castes. I was astonished with that. So then we got to discussing about caste. Then he said many times that you must read that recent Nilakandan book, Dharmic Social History of India. I've written a review as well. Then when I returned to Kolkata, he asked me, "Do you want to read that book? I can send you that book." So lo and behold, here's the gift he sent me. It's a huge book. I had no idea. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this book and discussing this book with you all in our membership live streams. Because I'll be honest with you all. I'm honest with you all, but much to the detriment of my success with this channel, all the time. So I'll be honest here as well. I was not sure if Arvindan Neelakandan is a legit, well-read guy, or is he just another Sanatan economist type of a sociologist, or wannabe sociologist. But the things he told me about him, and his views, a lot of things about his ideas and other books as well, I was finally convinced. So now I'm very much excited about reading this book. Maybe a possibility of a Hindu sociology. But to be fair, if it's Hindu sociology, it won't really be sociology. Sociology needs to, whatever sociology we do, it needs to play in the same arenas as sociology from other parts of the world. But we must be subtle about it, of course. But I'll be very, very curious to know what he has to say. Let's read the blurb, by the way. I haven't even read the blurb. I've been so busy with spending all my money on court issues. How India, a land of diverse ethnicities, religions, and languages, has managed to maintain its social cohesion and harmony for thousands of years. How has it managed the forces of social stratification, social exclusion, social stagnation, and social emancipation? Are the institutions of caste and untouchability, jati and varna peculiar to India? Oh, this is the point where we first started the discussion on caste. No. He was discussing caste. He was saying that Nilakandan has criticized RSS on caste. So I said that, casteism has existed all around the world in some form or the other, with some name or the other. Do you know what his response was? What do people usually say in this situation? That, yes, you're absolutely right, or no, you're absolutely wrong. Caste was an incredibly beautiful thing that only happened in India, or caste was an incredibly bad thing that only happened in India. He says, Mr. Jatayu says, yes, that's what an anthropologist would say. So you see, that's the range of his reading. So are the institutions of caste and untouchability, jati and varna peculiar to India? Or is there some other deeper code, coda? I don't know if it's a spelling mistake, or is there some actual word called CODA? Um, Other deeper coda to Indian society that sustains it through millennia. This book explores these questions by tracing the origin and evolution of India's social systems, from the ancient Harappan civilization to the present day. It reveals underlying principles, values, and worldviews that shaped India's social dynamics and enabled it to adapt and thrive in changing times. It also highlights the role of Indian spiritual values, especially the concepts of yagya and bhakti, in fostering special inclusion, social inclusion, and emancipation. Drawing on historical data from various Hindu traditions and biographical data of civilizational spiritual seers, the book challenges the common perception of these seers as mere rebels or social reformers. Instead, it shows how they were agents of self realization who also energized society to achieve social transformation. Acha, nice. This book is not only a comprehensive and insightful account of India's social history, but also a valuable source of inspiration and guidance for anyone who seeks to create a more peaceful, harmonious, and prosperous world. The logo, by the way, it's a yagya, right? Oddly reminds me of Jordan Peterson's channel logo. So, what's the discussion in the comment section? Oh, you all are discussing some other stuff. Okay. Now, we are going to check out one of the interviews that Salvatore Babones has recently given in the West regarding India and Dharma and his book, Dharma Democracy. Fascinating stuff here, guys. Please also do a debrief of Pune tour. सौरभ भाई, बहुत बार तो कर लिए हम ऑलरेडी. पूरा का टाइम पुणे 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 ही तो कर रहे थे. ठीक है, एक दिन हम इसमें इसी बीच एक सेपरेट ऑडियंस इंटरेक्शन स्ट्रीम करेंगे, जिस दिन हम फिक्स कोई टॉपिक के बिना ही बात करते हैं. उस दिन फिर से हम पुणे डिस्कस करेंगे. आई हैव नो प्रॉब्लम. आई कैन डिस्कस महाराष्ट्र फॉर द एंड ऑफ टाइम, टिल द एंड ऑफ टाइम. डू यू नो हिस्ट्री ऑफ हिंदुइज्म इन आर्मेनिया? नो, I don't see the Gospels and okay.
The book's called Dharma Democracy in two senses. It's kind of a play on the word Dharma in two senses of the word. One is simply that Dharma means duty. And the idea that the narrative of a democracy of duties is something that plays very well in India, and I believe would play well across the developing world, as opposed to a democracy of rights, which is
This is where, by the way, I have a big problem. I'm curious about this topic. I'll finish the book and then draw my full conclusions, but I'm immediately weary of anyone, especially in a position of authority, which Salvatore Babones isn't really. This becomes especially problematic if it's a politician or a supporter of a political party which is in power, when they start talking about duties and responsibilities over rights. That's when they mean that fuck your rights. Just do what we tell you, and that's a duty to the state or nation. Okay, so I'm wondering, I find asking myself, why is a dispassionate sociological observer of India also now bothered about duties, unless he's saying that that's how India functions. They are more inclined towards duties and rights. That might be so. Then I would see that as a criticism. Let's see.
How we might frame democracy.
Welcome, everyone. It's Jeff from the Burning Archive here, and today I'm talking with Salvatore Babones from the University of Sydney, a political sociologist who has just published this excellent book, Dharma.
I've got a copy too.
There we go, Dharma double promo. How India built the third world's first democracy. Welcome, Salvatore.
Pleasure to talk to you.
भाई, ये
Unlike probably
ये जो
99
कॉम्प्लीमेंट है, ये जो टेस्टिमोनियल उपाधि है, थर्ड वर्ल्ड का फर्स्ट डेमोक्रेसी, भाई किसने बोला है आज तक? I don't know. I have never heard that phrase ever. No matter what disagreements you end up having with Salvatore Babones, no matter what disagreements minuscule I have with the professor, you obviously can't ignore the significant argument and narrative shifts that he has been able to make, or at least provide us with weapons which can be legitimately used in any battlefield all around the world. Okay, like that example of, yeah, India's democracy is flawed, etc. But who are we comparing it to? We are comparing India's democracy with the richest nations in the history of mankind, whereas India's poverty is akin to Africa's. How is then this going on? How can it be possible? What is making it possible? Okay, he has brought out that idea. Now he's pointing out that this is the first democracy in the third world, almost the only democracy in the third world, and the only functional democracy or functioning liberal nation state which has remained that, or especially become that, after kicking out the colonialists. These are not small things. No matter who has been in power, no matter where we are right now, no matter what our civic sense, no matter how much our men ask for bob and vagine pics, this stuff is not insignificant. This is insane. This is an insane achievement. The credit, of course, goes to our ancestors who have molded our ways of thinking. Our worldview is inspired by our ancestors, our texts, etc. But it's not nothing, and it's not nothing to even point these out, and it's definitely not nothing that a Western white scholar points these things out to other Western white scholars. Dada, since Pakistan was pretty much a quasi-US ally during the Cold War, it is a first world nation technically, and so we can say that.
1% of viewers, you've actually met Narendra Modi, I believe, when he came to Sydney as well, and you've been doing this research.
Well said. We basically humanoid. I agree with you. India is second world, but he is saying that India built the world's first democracy in the third world because, and that is a factual statement, because when India built the democracy, when India became a proper democracy, at that point of time, India was third world. So India didn't manage to become a democracy just because it was second world or just because it was not third world. That is the achievement here, that it became a democracy even when it was a first world, and now it's not even a third world. Even when it was a third world, and now it's not even a third world, it's still a democracy, and it's going on improving. Like, this was even what Barack Obama said, remember? Of course, his probably Harvard graduate, literature graduate speechwriter said it, but he had said this when he came to meet Manmohan Singh, that I think he said this about US as well, that USA and India both are let's say function well because of democracy, not in because of democracy, not in spite of it, something like that. What I'm trying to focus on here is that there's always a tendency to criticize democracy, right? Because of the insane numbers of problems it brings with itself. But I'm absolutely with Winston Churchill on this one, that yes, democracy is very bad, but it's the best option. And India was able to execute that insanity called democracy, that tough, non-lazy job called democracy, no matter how flawedly. Well, Congress's democracy, we know. Even today, free speech is a joke. Most people don't even want free speech. Okay. So with those, let's say, disfigured jigsaw puzzle pieces which didn't fit really properly, it stayed together as a country. It had more or less a democracy when it was a dirt poor third world country, and now it's going on improving while still banking on that system. That is an insane achievement. And that's what Salvatore Babones is pointing out here.
Project on India and democracy over the last 5 years or so, which is the
Oh, yeah. What Sudeep is pointing out here, this criticism is fair. This recent downhill race to the bottom needs to be addressed. I don't see how it can be addressed in a democracy, but this needs to end immediately, maybe with push from influencers, etc. But that fucker Arvind Kejriwal opened the gates for this. No one can escape it now. And this is not democracy. 1500 रुपए तो सुदीप इज पॉइंटिंग आउट, लोग तो 10,000 रुपए दे रहे हैं और फिर उनके सपोर्टर्स बोल रहे हैं कि नहीं 10,000 रुपए कुछ ब्रिलियंट डेवलपमेंटल इकोनॉमिक्स नोबेल लॉरिएट अभिजीत बैनर्जी का कुछ आइडिया है इसलिए दिया था, वोट में जीतने के लिए नहीं दिया, तो भाई पावर में आके उसके बाद देते. तो दिस इज डेफिनेटली अ लार्ज ब्लॉट ऑन आवर डेमोक्रेसी.
The focus of your book, and we'll get to that in a second. I just was keen maybe just to get a quick comment from you, because we're speaking in the midst of some, not insignificant tension between US and India over trade talks and remarks about dead economies and that sort of thing. What do you think this current spat, if you like, between India and US is telling us, not so much about the United States as whether India is a little bit more capable than maybe people tend to think it is?
Really what it tells us is that both Donald Trump and Narendra Modi play to domestic audiences. Both are politicians first and national leaders second. They are playing to their, to their own countries. Neither cares much about.
Oh, nice. A lot of interesting comments here. Everyone is disagreeing with me when I said that democracy is the best option. I think it's the best option, especially for a diverse country. थोड़ा कल्चरल कोहिजन होमोजेनिटी रहता तो वी कुड हैव ट्राइड अदर स्टफ. आई डोंट थिंक एनीथिंग एल्स कैन बी पॉसिबल इन इंडिया. Varun is saying, but it's not really specially unique, Dada. Many countries post-colonization are far more developed and ahead of our country. Far more, I don't see who. Yeah, maybe USA. USA itself is a post-colonial country. But at least in Asia, around us, though, nobody.
How his statements appear in the other country. Very little of economic importance, I think, is going to come of any of this. And I don't think it's a real diplomatic spat. That is to say, I don't think there's any ill will that will result from this. But Narendra Modi wants to appear strong and in command within India. And Donald Trump, of course, loves trolling world leaders everywhere. And so we have this clash of words that I really don't think has any practical implications as far as economic relations or broader diplomatic relations go.
Yeah, that's interesting. A bit of maybe a storm in a tea.
We basically humanoid two things. Firstly, Singapore is a small country with diversity nowhere near to India's. Secondly, we always criticize or we know of this criticism of Mera Abdul Alag hai, right? Then don't make this argument of Mera dictator alag hai. You never know what the dictator ends up doing. Lee Kuan Yew could just as well have been a crazy fucker like Zimbabwe's dictators. Or that Last King of Scotland movie wala Rwanda dictator. Dictator अच्छा होगा तो ये गारंटी तुमको कहां से मिलता है तुम लोगों को? तो मेरा डिक्टेटर अलग है, ये आर्गुमेंट काम नहीं कर सकता.
I'm confident it is a storm in a teacup.
I mean, I have seen a few commentators, ex-ambassadors and things comment that, the mood on the street in India is very different to the sort of mood in the government, I guess, or the diplomats, etc. And the diplomats and governments just need to proceed calmly, whatever the sort of...
Yeah, Sanket. Do you think he's saying this because India mended its ways regarding our own tariffs against them, the barriers to entry of American products, etc.?
Mood on the street might be, which kind of reinforces
the
your
mood
comment
in India,
about domestic. Yeah,
the mood in India will change 10 times by Friday, and Donald Trump will also. So it really doesn't matter. I'm sorry. I tend to be very unconcerned about these sort of things because I promise you, 1 year from now, no one will even remember this happened. Yeah. And that's often the case with things that we get caught up with in headlines. But this spat most of all. I mean, India-US trade is very thin. There's really very little involved in India-US trade. The differences in wages between India and the US are so enormous that any tariffs really wouldn't make much difference anyway. And neither economy would be impacted. I mean, neither economy would even feel the result of even a catastrophic drop in trade, which catastrophic doesn't mean to zero. 20% would be an unprecedented, enormous, Great Depression era drop in trade, and a 20% drop in trade between US and India, which will not happen, I want to be clear. Even that wouldn't be felt by either economy.
Indeed.
Tempest in a teacup, indeed.
So we'll leave that to be tomorrow's Fish and Chips for now, and Fish and Chips wrap up. One of the impetuses for your book...
Okay, Ashkacham, by the way, I have to ask something to you. You said that this guy at least understands India, etc. So you have checked out his channel earlier as well. This is the first time I'm hearing of him. What's his channel like? What does he do? What does he have any qualifications and stuff or any background? Who is he? Who is he and what's his channel about?
The sort of general climate of opinion, I guess, particularly in Western countries over the last 10 or so years, that India had degenerated from its former status as a clear democracy under the BJP government since 2014. And in particular, some of the sort of indexes and commentary, I mean, I noticed myself some of the commentary around the 2024 election was quite dramatic.
Salvatore Babones, the index killer.
Can you tell us what your hypothesis is about why there is this attitude towards Indian democracy amongst some in the West?
Bizarrely, we wouldn't know that Indian democracy had supposedly deteriorated if the European Union hadn't funded a grant proposal back in 2015. There's an organization called the Varieties of Democracy Institute. It's become very quickly the world-leading democracy rating agency. It's at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. It's only been publishing reports since 2017. Until they published their first report, the world didn't know that India had a low-quality democracy. They're the ones who pegged it at a relatively low level, and they've relentlessly brought it down since 2017 with more and more dire reports. Now, before that, all the major democracy indices we had were rating India very high, some as high as Western European countries, others on a par with Eastern European members of the European Union. So, clear democracies, but maybe not as well institutionalized as France or England. We only know, quote unquote, that India has declined as a democracy because of this new index. And where does the new index get its data? Well, completely differently from all of the other major indices, it gets its data from the country being studied. That is to say, it surveys India.
He has a very significant section on this. I did not know of this, of course. Many other indices which have existed forever, which have said forever that yes, India is a great democracy. It's functioning really well. It's on par with all your European countries, or it's definitely often, if not always, better than USA and England as democracy, etc. Okay, but all of those indices were based on data like how many opposition parties are there, by what majority does the party in power win, what kind of significant opposition they have, how many seats does the opposition parties get, etc. On those matrices, India always performed well. Then out of the blue, this new index came in, which asked people in India, intellectuals in India, that do you think India is doing a good job with the democracy? And those simply Narendra Modi and BJP haters say that no, India sucks now. India democracy sucks now because Narendra Modi is in power. So that's how we lose our place in the index.
Political scientists on a whole series of questions. They don't simply ask, is India a democracy? They ask a whole series of questions that then get amalgamated into an index. Now, the other indices were outsiders looking in, and those evaluations were very high. But what we're getting from India now are insiders, for lack of a better word, complaining about their country, with the result that we take on board their complaints. But because the complaints ultimately are filtered through a Western institution, the Varieties of Democracy Institute, they have that imprimatur of, well, the Swedes, the Europeans, say that India has failed as a democracy. I don't think that's the case. I think when we look at things objectively, we can show that for every index that we can verify objectively, the index is wrong. But the simple fact is, as I wrote in the title of a newsletter last week, India's political scientists don't like Narendra Modi. And as a result, they have claimed that under Narendra Modi, Indian democracy has failed. Now, it's the same phenomenon as if you were to ask, I mean, there were two famous Yale professors famously left America for Toronto because of the election of Donald Trump. And they claim that the United States is no longer democracy. Well, if you polled these American democracy experts about American democracy, they would say, no, America is now a fascist dictatorship. Would we believe that? Probably not. It would just be their venue for complaining about the United States. Well, that's what we have with India, is a venue for complaining about India. But the magic of numbers, once you put a number on something, a ranking on something, it becomes real in people's minds.
Yeah, indeed. And it's, I mean, I've on my channel been following Dr. S. Jaishankar in particular, focusing on Indian foreign policy and that sort of thing over the last couple of years. And he's made quite a reputation for himself for pushing back against, Western journalists. I think famously, he was in Sydney for the Raisina Dialogue. Raisina Dialogue a year or two ago. Just prior to the election, and made some comments about George Soros and that sort of thing. So there's a whole gallery now of his witty pushbacks against the sort of Western commentary on India as a democracy, and it seems to reflect a more confident, assertive mood, amongst leaders in India and associated with the BJP, etc. And this funny term that people use about Hindu nationalism. Do you see the same thing? And what really is the BJP and this idea of Hindu nationalism? Does it even exist?
Look, Dr. Jaishankar, Subramanian Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India, is an interesting character. If you carefully listen to what he says, he rarely, if ever, I don't think I've ever heard him actually defend Indian democracy. Instead, he asserts that you have no right to judge our country. And while that may be true, that's hardly a robust defense. He never gets into the details. He never tries.
I absolutely love this criticism of S. Jaishankar. Stop defending, start attacking. This is what Academic Man said in one of his Academic Man Suggests posts that I shared here. This is what Savarkar said regarding temples, that stop getting yourselves killed in hordes trying to protect a temple which you can't even protect in the end. Start destroying other stuff in response. So here again, this criticism of S. Jaishankar is scathing and is 100% accurate. It sounds so weak. It doesn't sound weak in relation to what we have had in the past, but it definitely sounds weak objectively, because you are not explaining that, okay, let's say you are calling this cup a dog, and Jaishankar says, how dare you call this cup a dog? Instead of explaining how this cup is not a dog.
Present an alternative case.
Or the even worse argument that, oh, you have had so many cups which have masqueraded as dogs. How dare you now call our cup a dog?
And personally, I think it's a major failure for an external affairs minister who should be involved in public diplomacy, which is to say, he shouldn't just be defending India for a domestic audience. So the message for domestic audience is, how dare you criticize India? That plays very well in India. Instead, he should be going through the statistics and going through the numbers on India for a Western audience.
Which is exactly what Salvatore Babones has done in the book Dharma Democracy. I hope you all someday read it. But you won't believe. I mean, this is the best Indian PR that has ever happened in the last 10, 20 years regarding Indian society, Indian politics. Okay. This is on par with Swami Vivekananda talking about Hindu spirituality, or Tagore, Amartya Sen's Satyajit Ray sort of pointing out that, yes, India does some awesome things every now and then. This is on par with that. That wait. India is not only not disgusting, India is in fact pretty damn awesome. I'm stopping short of revealing everything that's there in the books, in the book, but just trust me, bro, that if you read that book, anyone who reads that book and completely internalizes that book can legitimately debate any geopolitics expert in the entire world, any foreign minister, any journalist in the entire world, and destroy them if they are trying to defend India. I mean, our bros who will read the book, okay? This book is insanely powerful.
Which he doesn't do. And as a result, he doesn't make any friends in the Western media. There aren't sympathetic profiles or sympathetic reports of his rebuttals of criticisms, because he doesn't rebut the criticisms. He just says they're wrong. And that you have no right to criticize. Now, I've told Indians before, I've even told members of the Indian government, that's the sort of thing that Russia or China does. Yeah. Says, well, you Westerners have no right to judge us.
You Westerners, you Western-style capitalism wale people, how dare you set dogs in our neighborhoods?
Well, maybe that's true. But the fact is, unlike Russia or China,
Yeah, that's the problem. It's morally true. It's morally a legit thing to say that you all have done all these shenanigans all over the world for all these centuries. Why are you bothering us now? But you can't do that because you are not powerful enough to say that. You can't say fuck you. You can't isolate yourself. You can. You'll end up like Zimbabwe and Rwanda, like those dumbasses. Someone was talking about South Africa. South Africa is not a better country than India. And so anyway, I'll come back to this point later.
India has the same kinds of liberal democratic institutions that we do, and those institutions operate very well in India. There are real checks on executive authority. There are real checks on what the government can do. There's real accountability in India. There's a very vibrant press in India. Every single thing gets reported and endlessly dissected, pro-government or anti-government. There's nothing like a Russia, and certainly not like a Chinese press in India. And yet,
yeah, that's the point. I've made this point many times before as well, and I had a sort of friendly banterish debate with one of my colleagues in Smart as well on our return journey from Pune. We were talking about which academics to take seriously, which to not. At one point, he said that you are suffering from a colonial mindset because you are calling these XYZ academics legit and these not. So I said, bro, first of all, this is why they are in fact legit. This is why they are not legit. Secondly, you cannot afford to call this a colonial mindset because you are in a cricket field. You cannot play cricket. Everyone around you is interested in cricket. The audience is interested in cricket. Your opponent is playing cricket. You are one powerless beggar in the field who is saying, I want to play football in the cricket field with other cricketers. You cannot do that. You have to win in the game of cricket, win so many matches that you buy the fucking stadium and then turn it into a football ground. You're not that right now.
On freedom of the press rankings, on democracy rankings, India is now being grouped with Russia and China, which is just crazy.
Yes,
and part of the reason for that defensiveness is this rise of what is unfortunately called Hindu nationalism. I mean, the word travels. I avoided it for years until I just accepted that there's no better term for it. And the reason I resisted it is there's nothing Hindu about Hindu nationalism. It's nationalism among people of Hindu faith.
So well said.
But it's not particularly Hindu in any religious orientation. It's not the same as if we say
Guys,
Islamism.
I have seen many criticisms of Salvatore Babones in this particular context, okay, that why is he saying India is not a civilization state? One of our viewers, in fact, has clarified this point in another video. In another recent interview, we went to discuss this book. In the comment section, I saw our viewer has clarified that Salvatore Babones is not ignorant for saying this. He's not ignorant for saying that India is not in fact a Hindu state, and he's not ignorant for saying that India is not a civilization state. We'll get to this point now. Listen very carefully. The state means the government and the structure. Our state is not Hindu in any way, and not only recently in the last 2-3 years, people have actually started demanding it in the way it would actually end up being a Hindu Rashtra. It hasn't happened historically. Savarkar didn't, and which is why Savarkar is also hated by a lot of Hindutwadis these days, that he was too liberal for us, etc. But and for that reason, Gandhi is probably the father of the nation that ended up coming about in 1947 with its somewhat retarded laws, etc. Gandhi is definitely the father of that nation. Don't malign Veer Savarkar by calling him a father of that nation with those laws, with that state apparatus.
Where people are doing things in the name of their religion. Hindu nationalists are not doing things in the name of Lord Ram or in the name of Shiva. It's simply that Hindus in India have become, probably always were, very nationalistic, but it's become very public now and very aggressive. Unless we associate that only with the BJP, the same is true of pretty much every political party in India. You won't find any political party in India that has qualms about nationalism. In fact, the Indian National Congress, the leading opposition party and the official opposition party, routinely criticizes the BJP.
Sudeep, that basis was claimed by Savarkar, is agreed upon by a few of us. That's not the basis on which the state functions or the founding fathers functioned.
For not being nationalist enough, which is kind of crazy to Western but it's not particularly Hindu in any religious orientation. It's not the same as if we say Islamism, where people are doing things in the name of their religion. Hindu nationalists are not doing things in the name of Lord Ram or in the name of Shiva. It's simply that Hindus in India have become, well, probably always were, very nationalistic, but it's become very public now and very aggressive. Unless we associate that only with the BJP, the same is true of pretty much every political party in India. You won't find any political party in India that has qualms about nationalism. In fact, the Indian National Congress, the leading opposition party and the official opposition party, routinely criticizes the BJP for not being nationalist enough, which is kind of crazy to Western ears, but that's the narrative in India. So this muscular defensiveness on the part of India doesn't just come from the Bharatiya Janata Party, the Indian People's Party, the governing party of Narendra Modi. It comes from all sides in India. That said, the INC leader, Rahul Gandhi, has been active in criticizing Indian democracy. And he's actually saying at time of recording that he has a nuclear bomb that he's going to explode of documentation of vote fraud. But he's been saying that for a week and we haven't seen it yet. So he's very critical of Indian democracy, but he's certainly not critical of India. He's critical of the government for not being Indian enough.
Yeah. I think in your book you describe the BJP as essentially like a modernizing party, and I guess
Very much so.
its role partly in Indian history is, I mean, it's been the first government for quite a long time that's had a.
Sanket, I'll tell you why I think that criticism, that comparison is fair, because Swami Vivekananda highlighted one aspect of India, and it reached everywhere, and it became insanely popular because no one had a problem with appreciating Hinduism, etc., because everyone was happy with that deal that, yes, you Westerners, you all are good at science, we are good at spirituality. So everyone was happy that India is good at spirituality. Okay, they are bad at science, they are admitting themselves. But this one, in fact, is a tougher job to claim to Westerners that India's democracy is insanely awesome. So even if it's not more significant, it's definitely as significant, because objectively speaking, they are just simply highlighting two good aspects of India to the world, promoting it that way.
Pretty, strong sort of majority, consolidated executive, so to speak, which is, pretty standard practice in Western democracies. Did you want to just say a bit about that, about the idea of the BJP as a modernising party, so people get a more realistic sense of what it's about?
Look, I use modernizing in its technical social science sense. That is, the BJP is not an old-style party based on family loyalties. It's not a party based on caste divisions and caste identity. It's not a party based on linguistic nationalism. All of those kinds of parties exist in India. The BJP is a modern, bureaucratic political party that operates much like the U.S. Democrats or Republicans or the Australian Liberals or Labour, which is to say, it's yes, if you're a child of a parliamentarian, you may have a little leg up, but the party's not run by any particular family. It's not going to get you elected. It's not going to get you a position if you're not going to win the votes. I mean, it's ruthlessly committed to winning votes on a bureaucratic organization buttressed by a famously efficient IT cell. That is, their information arm is extremely professional, using census data and social media data to target not just particular districts, particular voting booths, with getting the right message specifically to that voting booth. They'll have customized vote sheets or position sheets for every particular voting booth around India. It's not just a single placard for the country. It's highly differentiated micro-targeting. In that sense, it's adopted all the modern tools of the marketing world in the internet age to the pursuit of politics. That's very different from other political parties. So the main opposition party, the Indian National Congress, is a family-run party. It's the descendants of Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi and their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren who run the party. It is... On the other hand, there are
basically a family dynasty, isn't it?
It's a family dynasty, much like you would find in Bangladesh or Pakistan. There are caste-based parties that are simply members of a particular caste who all vote for a particular party leader. There are linguistic nationalist parties that are, especially in South India, that are organized on the basis of, if you speak Tamil or if you speak Telugu, you should vote for this party. Those are traditional forms of organization that we would...
Most educated states creating the most primitive forms of parties, political parties, and democracy. Whereas BJP, the trad, it's not trad, even trads would say it's not trad. But the alleged trad party is the modernizing force in Indian democracy, guys.
Expect in India's has survived as a democracy is that it has navigated this transition to modern unifying politics in a way that and when I call BJP unifying, a lot of people think no, it's divisive. Well, yes, its language is divisive. It's particularly divisive towards Muslim Indians. That's a fact. But it unifies across all of these major divisions in society, and it unifies mainly Hindu voters. It does some Muslim outreach, particularly with Sufi Muslims and other Muslim minority groups.
Can we really underestimate how much it unites the opposition as well? I'm sure you all know, if you all have any common relatives, ever since BJP has come to power, Atal Bihari Vajpayee has become such a great former prime minister. Gandhi is such a great man in commie families now. They're reading Gandhi, etc. Because now they must unite with Congresses. Like up until 2009, 10, 11, each and every commie I knew, whether the moderate nice uncle in the neighborhood or that far left crazy fuck in JU, each and everyone hated every Congressee with their guts. And the far leftists in JU, of course, wanted their blood as well. But now all of them are happy to see Rahul Gandhi as prime minister. So it's definitely a uniting force.
But among the majority Sunni Muslim community in India, it does relatively little outreach, makes very little effort to appeal to them. But outside of that one minority, in the BJP unifies people across caste divisions, across language divisions, across sectarian divisions within the Hindu faith. And in that sense, it's creating an India-wide network. That
ये तो एकदम सच है. This has been a recurring meme as well. कि हाँ अभी तो अटल जी बढ़िया पीएम लग रहे हैं, योगी जी को आने दो, मोदी जी सेंटा क्लॉज लगने लगेंगे. Wait, there was another important point here. Yes, Indian Muslims, not Muslim Indians.
Unifying politics in a way that and when I call BJP unifying, a lot of people think no, it's divisive. Well, yes, its language is divisive. It's particularly divisive towards Muslim Indians. That's a fact. But it unifies across all of these major divisions in society, and it unifies mainly Hindu voters. It does some Muslim outreach, particularly with Sufi Muslims and other Muslim minority groups. But among the majority Sunni Muslim community in India, it does relatively little outreach, makes very little effort to appeal to them. But outside of that one minority, in the BJP unifies people across caste divisions, across language divisions, across sectarian divisions within the Hindu faith. And in that sense, it's creating an India-wide political parties in India have to start to, if they're ever going to compete with it.
Interesting. And the comparison that's going in my mind, it may be a bit of an unfair comparison, but is with Blair's New Labour modernising Britain in whenever it was 70s, 80s, or
structurally,
90s,
structurally, absolutely yes. Political message,
different political message, but the kind of structural role replacing a sort of somewhat moribund, party traditions or that kind of thing. So you call India Dharma democracy.
Title of the book?
Yeah, title of the book. Do you just want to explain what you mean by that term and what you see as some of the strengths of, because you really present India as a success story of democracy.
Absolutely.
What are some of the strengths of India's democracy?
The book's called Dharma Democracy in two senses. It's kind of a play on the word Dharma in two senses of the word. One is simply that Dharma means duty. And the idea that the narrative of a democracy of duties is something that plays very well in India, and I believe would play well across the developing world, as opposed to a democracy of rights, which is how we might frame democracy. Now, India has human rights, civil rights. This is not an issue. A lot of people think Muslims are repressed in India. There's a lot of Muslim segregation and Muslim discrimination, but Muslims have always had full civil rights, full voting rights, full legal rights. I mean, that's not an issue in India. India has civil rights, but the narrative around democracy is not one of you're Indian and therefore you have these inalienable rights, as an American might think of it. It's instead, you're Indian and so you have these duties to your country. And that's especially important in a developing country scenario where, there are multiple internal insurgencies, there are multiple language communities, people are divided on caste. So emphasizing to everybody that they have a duty to their country, not just rights from their country, I think is a successful formula. But of course, Dharma is also inextricably tied up with Hindu faith, and more broadly with Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh faith, but especially Hindu faith. And I call the book Dharma Democracy because India has succeeded in creating a Hindu civil society that permeates all of India across the entire continental-sized country. And that Hindu civil society is what has supported democracy through its most difficult trials. That is, most countries, virtually all countries, start out as democracy.
Fuck. Oh, shit. He just admitted this even on interviews. Yeah, of course, he says this in the book anyway. Remember, we read out that preface section of the book. He's going around saying it, blurting it out bluntly, proudly, at least not proudly, unapologetically. The kind of blurting out Indians like these days. Everyone has to be unapologetic. Look how unapologetic Salvatore Babones is. You can have criticisms, some disagreements, or I don't know why would people call him a wolf in sheep's clothing, but look what he just said. It's the Hindu civil society who is maintaining India's democracy.
Sized country. And that Hindu civil society is what has supported democracy through its most difficult trials.
Holy cow! Yeah, holy cow today. Here's to our Hindu civil society who supported democracy through its most difficult trials. So yes, holy cow it is.
All of India across the entire continental-sized country. And that Hindu civil society is what has supported democracy through its most difficult trials. That is, most countries, virtually all countries, start out as democracies. I mean, all of the post-colonial countries of the developing world have democratic constitutions.
And this is where the catch comes in, and I think the more cooler part, that he is not saying this because he has read Advaita Vedanta. He is not saying this because he is a disciple of Chinmay Mission or ISKCON or BAPS. He's not saying this because he's a fan of Hinduism. He's not saying this because he wants to add Sanskrit words to every goddamn concept. He's saying this because he's just simply a dispassionate, unbiased, honest observer, researcher from an outside perspective. This is exactly what our bro, what's his name? Where's that awesome book? Yeah, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. This is what Adam Smith always wanted.
The problem isn't that their constitutions are undemocratic. Nobody says, I'm founding this country to be a dictatorship. The country's always founded to be a democracy. It's just that the democracy always fails very quickly.
Democracy always fails, and then someone says, "Mera dictator alag hai," and then screws the country.
Quickly. In India, there was a strong enough civil society that when democracy did fail, when its founding leader, and I borderline call him a dictator, Jawaharlal.
Yeah, he repeatedly makes this point that the only time Indian democracy has failed is because of Indira Gandhi.
Jawaharlal Nehru, when he died, Indian democracy survived. When his daughter Indira Gandhi imposed emergency rule and attempted to literally rule as a dictator, Indian democracy survived. And it survived because its civil society was strong enough to hold it together. Now, that said, we have to immediately recognize that Hindu society and civil society in India excluded and still excludes Muslim Indians, with the result that India is a strong democracy with a problem of social exclusion. The same way, if we look at the United States in the 1950s, clearly it was a democracy in the 1950s. It was the great era of American democracy in many ways, but it had Jim Crow, it had severe exclusion of African Americans, it even had denial of...
Yeah, this is the exclusion part we talked about when we read the introduction to his book. That since this exclusion we know is factually speaking self-inflicted by Muslims, is he blaming Hindus for it? And with this sentence, it does seem he's blaming Hindus for it. So we'll have to ask him this question. He has actually said that it can be long enough. He's going to make time because it's starting at 1:30 in the afternoon in India. Okay, so make sure you all keep your afternoons free. You all go celebrate Christmas with your commie friends in the late evening, but keep the afternoon for us with Salvatore Babones and ask as many questions as you want. So we'll have to clear out this point with him. Are Hindus actively excluding Muslims? What do you think is the best case scenario? What do you think can be his argument? Let's put ourselves in Salvatore Babones' shoes. What laws or stats can he might he be thinking of when he says that Hindu civil society has excluded Muslims? As far as I remember, he had made some follow-up point in the book The book is not near me. Okay, yeah, let him go ahead with this point. I'll just take out my my book. Okay, now we want to discuss this with him. And he considered that it doesn't matter if it is self-inflicted. Okay. Okay, let's see. We'll have this debate with him again.
Civil rights to African Americans and voting rights. Yet it was
Unless,
a democracy with a race problem.
Unless we just leave this be, because maybe he has to monkey balance in some way to let the book be, let's say, have a have the garb of legitimacy.
Severe exclusion of African Americans. It even had denial of civil rights to African Americans and voting rights. Yet it was still a democracy with a race problem. India is a democracy with a religious problem.
One could almost say the same about, some Europe, like France, perhaps today,
A democracy with a religion problem. And look, some would say Australia is a democracy with an indigenous problem, that, rural and remote indigenous people are largely excluded from the mainstream of Australian society. Is that a failing? Of course it is. Does that prevent Australia being a democracy? Of course it doesn't.
Someone said that that he has said that it doesn't matter if it's self-inflicted. Why doesn't it matter? Does he mean then that the Indian state or Hindu civil society must do more to include them?
Indeed. So we talked there about, I guess, the discrimination against Muslims, and in a way that's inseparable from.
Someone. Acha, Sanket ne DP change kar diya achanak se, and I thought it's some other guy.
The history of the formation of India and partition in 1947, and you talk about
and that self-inflicted point was brought about in our live stream only for the first time when we were discussing the introduction of section of the book.
Separable from the history of the formation of India and partition in 1947, and you talk about how India is dealing with the challenge of both the legacy of partition, very complex event, and the sort of religious tolerance, I guess, or religious acceptance within Indian society. How is India dealing with those two big challenges?
There are low levels of Muslim participation in peak institutions in India, whether that's Parliament, the Lok Sabha, where we can see the extremely low. Muslims make up a little over 14% of the population, less than 5% of the Parliament. But more broadly, we can see it in media. We can see it in civil society organizations, in leadership positions, in places like hospitals and schools. The only place we don't see it is Bollywood. There's a strong Muslim presence in Bollywood, much like there's a strong African-American presence in Hollywood. So being a minority group does not mean you can't succeed in entertainment. But in every other sphere of Indian life, there's a deficit of Muslim Indians. That said, we can look back to the partition of India in 1947, when the Muslim intellectual class from all of India, not just from the areas that became Pakistan and Bangladesh, the Muslim intellectual class largely left India to build their futures.
Again, if anybody thinks that he's an apologist for Islamists, he's not, because he makes this point as well. Firstly, he's saying that Hindu is the Hindu civil society which has strengthened and sustained India's democracy. He's also pointing out that Muslim intellectuals did not contribute to India's freedom movement. They chilled and ran away to Pakistan at the first chance.
Pakistan. And when I say largely, I mean almost entirely, whether it's the military. Again, another statistic, military officers in India, there are very few Muslim military officers. Why? Well, more than 95% of the military officer cadre opted to go to Pakistan in 1947. The civil service, again, more than 95% of Muslim civil servants opted to go to Pakistan. Even Muslim military officers and civil servants who hailed from areas that would ultimately become part of India left to go and build their careers in Pakistan. So it's a generational process of rebuilding that Muslim intelligentsia in India. The ones who were left in India were largely connected with the mosques, as they were directly involved in preaching to the people, with the result that Muslim civil society in India, such as it is today, is overwhelmingly dominated by ultra-religious groups. And they're ultra-religious not because there's something evil about them, but because what would you expect a bunch of imams to be? I mean, of course they're highly religious, and they're very focused on religion as the basis of their participation in society. Now, that's a challenge. It's not just a challenge for 1947, because we have lots of data to suggest that whether it's in India or in the West, who becomes professors, children of professors, who becomes civil servants, children of civil servants, who becomes lawyers, children of lawyers, who becomes military officers, children of military officers. So this has rippled through India for the last several generations. It's slowly dissipating, but not quickly enough. Now,
not quickly enough because the free market is not getting here quickly enough. And remember that point about Bollywood and also LA, where blacks are very successful, as well as in Bollywood, Muslims are successful. Meanwhile, in West Bengal, which allegedly has no casteism, which at the very least has almost no social mobility, there you see there are no Christians, successful Christians in the industry. There are no successful lower caste in the industry. There are no Muslims in the industry. It's only Brahmins, Vaidyas, Kaistas.
Affirmative action can be a very touchy subject for people. I think it's probably, in general, it does not work as a strategy for improving the lives of ordinary people because it generally benefits elites in any particular area. It doesn't benefit the ordinary people from the group. That said, it's probably important for India to have a higher level of representation. And thus, while I would not recommend India have a legal affirmative action program, minimum number of Muslim candidates for parliament or minimum number of Muslims sit on boards of directors, I think that would be very divisive. On the other hand, if I were running an Indian board of directors, I would.
By the way, did you see that he said that reservations don't do you all that much good? Did you all see that point just now?
I think that would be very divisive. On the other hand, if I were running an Indian board of directors, I would look to, maybe we should have at least one Muslim on our board. If I were running an Indian civil society organization, I would ask, maybe we should have at least one Muslim on our executive staff. And these are the questions that India has not yet asked that I really think.
Haven't we? Haven't we always asked these questions?
The country needs to start asking, the Indian elite needs to start asking in the future.
I guess to some degree, I mean, I'm not by any means a specialist on this, but I've been reading this book by Joy Chatterjee, Shadows at Noon, the South Asian 20th Century, which does explore these issues in quite a bit of depth. But I mean, the movement of the Muslim intellectuals to Pakistan was not all push factor. It should be clear. It's also partly because Pakistan was formed.
Saurabh Naik is asking a brilliant question here. Is West Bengal an outlier? Same cannot be said about the other communist heaven, Kerala. The movie industry is filled with everyone. Yes, you are right. West Bengal is an outlier. It is the most casteist with the least social mobility, which has never been called out for its casteism or its lack of social mobility. Therefore, not only has it done bad things that other states have always done, but it has forever gotten away with the bad things it has done and keeps on doing even today. Therefore, it ends up being an outlier.
In part through
Bangladesh's film industry, entertainment industry has more diversity than Kolkata's. Okay. In the Bangladeshi rock, metal, independent music scene, in their movie industry, playback scene, composer scene, every now and then you will see one gigantic, huge name, which is either Hindu or Christian. Okay. Artsel, legendary Bangladeshi heavy metal band, Christian vocalist. Andrew Badui. His Kishore is his made-up middle name because his family was probably a fans of Kishore Kumar. Andrew Badui, converted Christian from a lower caste background, 2-3 generations back. The most legendary playback singer, the most popular playback singer of Bangladesh ever. He's practically the Kishore Kumar of Bangladesh. Okay, he's Christian. Yet, Kolkata's Tollywood has no significant Christian, lower caste or Muslim name. It's only and only Brahmin, Vaidya, Kaista. Brahmin, Vaidya, Kaista. Brahmin, Vaidya, Kaista.
Loose term.
It was formed entirely to be a homeland for Muslim
and
Indians.
Islamic State.
That was the redict of Pakistan was to be a homeland for Muslims.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess the complex history between India and Pakistan has no doubt shaped attitudes and issues in ways that perhaps you're saying perhaps it's maybe time to get beyond a little bit, I guess, at least within India's domestic policies, if not its foreign policies.
Well, for you and me, it's ancient history, but let's remember, if you go back to the history, Hindu India to a person, I mean, I can't find a single Indian intellectual of the 1920s, 30s, or 40s who advocated a separation of Muslims and Hindus from India. The entire demand for Pakistan came from the Muslim side, in particular from Muhammad.
Didn't Ambedkar agree with Jinnah on this? Didn't Ambedkar ask for a separation? Great questions, Saurabh Naik, but I'll take them up later if I can remember. But Audi, if you can remember, ask them later on. We'll now have to stick to this topic more. For the people who are not that involved with the live chat and stuff, for them it becomes too jarring if I juggle two topics, two such distant topics.
Who would become the first president of Pakistan. There was no pressure from the Hindu side to eject Muslims. There were lots of hurt feelings along the lines of, why don't you want to live with us? So that there's a lingering resentment of the departure, that Muslims left India, and now people complain that why doesn't India have Muslim leaders? I understand the resentment over it. That said, it's been several generations. Indians may have that historical trauma still in their families and still in their knowledge, but I routinely tell Indian audiences, Hindu Indian audiences, that there are 200 million Muslims in India, and they're not going to go anywhere. Okay, so you hear the rhetoric sometimes, why don't you go to Pakistan, directed at Muslim Indians? Well, the time for that has passed. I mean, you might have yelled at their great-grandparents, why don't you go to Pakistan? You insisted on it. But it's not the people living today who insisted on Pakistan. In fact, all of our statistics suggest that Muslim Indians are highly patriotic Indians. They answer 99%. They're proud to be Indian. They want to be part of the Indian mainstream. There seems to be a strong appetite among Muslim Indians to be accepted as Indians. There's no Muslim outmigration from India. I mean, there is to the United States, but that's for obvious reasons. They want to upgrade. But there's no Muslim outmigration to peer countries. So there's no Muslim outmigration to Bangladesh, to Pakistan, certainly not to Afghanistan. It simply doesn't exist. Muslim Indians want to be Indians. It's time that Hindu Indians accepted that partitions in the past, and it's time to live for the 21st century.
It also relates to this kind of complex issue of, I guess, what...
Neon, he's going to look at data, and who is going to get included in that data? Not the patharbaz on the street. It's going to be middle-class educated Muslims who are your Muslim friends who invite you on Eid and feed you nice biryani every now and then. So they are definitely going to be patriotic. They are the ones who are saying that Dhurandhar is a fucking awesome movie. So yes, the stats here might be a bit of an issue.
Kind of state India and Pakistan are, is it a religious, Islamic state as Pakistan was conceived initially? Is it a nation state? If it's a nation state, what is its language? What is its sense of citizenship? All that sort of thing. And there's this new term, or not so new, but fashionable, let's say, term at the moment of civilization state that is being used, and which I've promised my Substack readers I'll write an article on one day. And particularly, it's in the context of this book, which became very popular in India. There we go, India.
Yeah. Oh, you got it.
Right. Yeah. I bought it a little while ago, and
you'll be very disappointed in the sequel.
Apparently the second volume is apparently out, but
the second volume's not very good. The India that it's brought is a very well written book. It's a very good book.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like the second one more.
But I guess there's also talk amongst various people in India about this idea that India is a civilization state, China's a civilization state, that sort of thing. It's something more than just a nation state. What's your, and you comment on that in your book, including on India, that is right. Yeah. What's your thinking there?
Look, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the Maldives are all Muslim states. I mean, they're not just Muslim majority countries. They're to greater or lesser degrees officially Muslim states. Not so. India is not an officially Hindu state. It is a secular state that has a Hindu majority. Much in the same way, in an earlier era, Australia would have been a secular state that had a Christian majority. And in many ways, that's the best way to think of India, to think of Australia 40 or 50 years ago, when the Christianity of Australia was not something legal. It was just something everybody knew, right? So if there was a religion class in schools 50 years ago, of course, it would be a Christian religious class. Not so today. But 50 years ago, obviously, yes. Public holidays in Australia, well, Easter and Christmas are public holidays. But wait, Australia is a secular state. Why are Easter and, well, because the majority of the population was practicing Christian at the time. Why are Sundays a day off? And why do people get double pay in the retail sector on Sundays? Well, because Sunday's the day of religious worship. Well, not for Muslims, not for Jews, not for Hindus, but for Christians. Well, in the same way, India is a Hindu state, and much less so than Australia 50 years ago would have been a Christian state. I'm sorry, India is a Hindu country, much less so than Australia 50 years ago. It was a Christian country, in that Hindu religious holidays are not public holidays in India. Hindu faith is not taught in the schools in India. There's a strict secularity of state institutions. That said, many Hindus are dissatisfied with that. Many Hindus want more of a recognition of the centrality of Hindu faith to the whole idea of India. And thus there's this new move to redefine India from being a secular nation state to being a Hindu civilizational state. And the problem with that is it's simply not true. There is a great Hindu civilization, to quote the title of another book by Pavan Varma, but that great Hindu civilization is centered on what's now India, but has nothing to do with the current Indian state. And I might add, the same is true of China. Civilizational state is a very evocative concept, but the fact is China has been ever more forcing its population into a Han Chinese nation state where everyone in China must conform to Han Chinese standards. And China has been working very hard to suppress regional dialects and regional languages like Cantonese and Fujianese, and instead substitute Mandarin to create a unified, single language, single ethnicity nation state out of the country. It's largely succeeded in the Northeast. I hear fantasies about a future independent Manchuria. It's never going to happen. What was once called Manchuria is now simply Chinese. There's no, and that's happening now in South China as well. The idea that there would be an independent Cantonese state sometime in the future is, again, a fantasy of international relations scholars and political scientists. It's never going to happen. India is similarly a nation state. Now, its nation has been created purely on a civic national identity.
Saurabh, Rajya is a state with capital S, the government, judiciary, executive, legislative, the laws, police. Rashtra are the populace. Whatever the majority, that is the Rashtra. Just like Australia is a Christian Rashtra. It's not a Christian Rajya.
Bizarrely, almost uniquely, without any reference to language. The only real parallel is maybe Switzerland has succeeded in creating a Swiss identity that is not just German. We all think German when we think Swiss. Yeah, but we all know there's Geneva and Neuchâtel. We all know there's a small Italian part of Switzerland. And in the same way, India is 40% Hindi speaking. It's 60 or 70% Hindi understanding, or speaking Hindi as a second language, being able to work in Hindi. And so it's a Hindi nation that's been developed, but the state is still a secular state that recognizes regional languages, that has no official language. That has 20 official languages. But so the practice in Parliament, for example, is to speak Hindi. The practice in courts is that the laws have been in English. But that English and Hindi dominance is a matter of practice, not a matter of identity. So India has successfully built a nation, and it's built that nation upon its unified Hindu civil society. But the state is, not, the state has created its own identity as the Indian state, and everybody accepts that compromise to a greater or lesser degree.
It's interesting. I think in a way Samuel Huntington did everyone a terrible disfavor by effectively defining civilizations by religious affiliation.
I'm not a Huntington fan.
No, nor am I. But
at the risk of losing a bunch of subscribers, I agree with these two gentlemen here when they criticize Samuel Huntington for attributing every aspect of a country or a populace to just their religious beliefs. Especially because I have, at the risk of losing more subscribers, I have read many good arguments against that idea from Amartya Sen's book, Identity and Violence, where he says, Bohumatrik Porichoy. I read this book in Bengali, translated by someone, some crazy person. Oh my God. It was like reading Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's Bengali poems. Amartya Sen wrote it in English. Bengali guy wrote it in English. Another crazy Bengali guy translated it into Bengali. Another crazy Bengali read it. So, that multidimensional identity, okay? At one point, I am a man, I'm an Indian, I'm a man of a certain age, I'm a man from a certain caste, I'm a human, I'm a Hindu, I'm a musician, I'm a politically interested guy, I'm a YouTuber. Now, which among these many facets to my life and identity and existence, which one is all-encompassing or the most significant? Who can say? It depends on the context, right? I don't think even you can say it. Just because you say it, it doesn't make it true. Because in many situations, one aspect of your identity will triumph over the other. So, but this is where exactly I agree with Amartya Sen, and in fact, it becomes a pro-Hindutva argument that he says, depending on the context, you always you must prioritize one aspect of your identity over the others. So in some contexts, definitely, I'm Hindu and Hindutvadi. In many other contexts, I'm not all the time, because it's not even the scope of that context. It's not even relevant to that context. The problem with Samuel Huntington's argument is that everything happens on the basis of religion. It's the Dumontian crap again, okay? Everyone, every Brahmin especially, is waking up every morning, reading Manusmriti, going out on the streets, and oppressing Shudras. Ye chal raha hai. That is what civilizational state means effectively, from the POV of Huntington, which is not the case. Otherwise, Dumo would be right. Now, my other problem with my own disagreement with Huntington is that I do notice that it's not nothing. There is definitely a role that religion plays in the society to a certain extent, but it's not everything. Otherwise, all Muslim states would be exactly the same. They would be exactly as good or exactly as bad. All Hindu countries, there are two, would be exactly similar. All Christian countries would be exactly similar. There would be no difference between USA and UK and southern parts of the African continent, because that's Christian. Okay, then how? You can of course bring up the fact that Africa has turned Christian only recently, but well, everyone has become Christian only recently, 500 years here and there. So I'll have to agree with Jeff Rich, Salvatore Babones, Max Weber, Declan Quigley, Amartya Sen, that only and only religion does not define an entire populace.
In the talk about civilization state, I hear something like, well, there's an aspiration to, I guess, get beyond, the colonial experience of Western-defined political traditions, and also a sense of, I guess, like, India is clearly something more, say, than a nation state like Australia. Okay, so
can I cut to the chase?
So,
They're jealous of China. Right? Yeah. Sorry to say it. If China gets to be a civilizational state, then we get to be a civilizational state is really what's driving the narrative. And the fact is, China's not a civilizational state. The fact that Martin Jacques picked up, ironically, an Indian term, the term civilizational state was originally developed with reference to India. And it was originally developed, ironically, to characterize India as a syncretic civilization that included strands from a Hindu strand, but also a major Muslim strand and a British strand, and that all these mixed in a civilization in India, not a nation, but a unified civilization. So ironically, the very word civilizational state came from India. But look, Indian nationalists are jealous that China gets to call the civilization.
Neon, very, very well said. Neon is saying that can Dharma and the principles of Dharma even be called only religion? It cannot. Samuel Huntington thinks it can. And so do many of his fans in India.
State, and India is as good as or better than China and everything, so India gets to be a civilizational state. I don't think there's any analytical rigor behind it. When they add the word state to it, it implies that the literal Indian state institutions are somehow civilizational.
Yes,
they're not.
Yes, exactly.
India may have a civilization. There's a great civilization that's centered on India.
Yeah.
But it's not connected to India's state institutions in any way.
Yes.
And people who want to make it out to be a Hindu civilization in India.
If that was the case, if Salvatore Babones, what he's saying was wrong, then what would be even the narrative of BJP? Then Congress has done a perfectly good job of giving Hindu vibes and keeping up with the Hindu Rashtra, right? That is not the case. There is not much Hindu basis in the statecraft. Or if there is, we are only ex post facto attributing many aspects to Hinduism. Nehru and all were not saying that, okay, this is mentioned in that scripture, therefore let's include this. They were at best saying that, well, this was also said there, so why not just go ahead with it? They weren't saying that, okay, this is there in the scripture, therefore let's put this. Okay, this can't be put here in our constitution because it's not in any Hindu scripture. Okay, that's not what the conversation took place in the constitutional debates, and therefore it's not a Hindu state, it's not a Hindu Rashtra, and it's therefore not a civilizational state. State is the government, guys, not us.
and that's the civilizational state of India, I always point out, well, what about the northeast of India, which is not majority Hindu? Are they part of the Indian?
Sanket, good question. But no. Chandragupta Maurya state was, I don't know about Shivaji Maharaja's exact state workings, state functionings, but I would be surprised if it was that very different from Chandragupta Maurya's. So Chandragupta Maurya state was definitely a Hindu state, because the Arthashastra, it begins with that statement that anything that disagrees with the Vedas is not significant and need not be cared about, etc. Something like that, right? Vedo khilo dharma moolam, something like that. So Arthashastra says that whatever I'm writing is not going to oppose the Vedas. That's the Hindu state.
Civilizational state. They say, oh, of course, we welcome it. What about Nepal? That's a Hindu majority country. Why isn't that part? Oh, no, Nepal's independent. It's not part of it. There's this very selective application of the idea.
Hindu state था कुछ दिन पहले तक, पूरा का पूरा देश में फिर भी माओइस्ट कैसे भर गए? Maybe because of one Italian woman.
Of a civilizational state. Look, it just doesn't hold empirical water. It's very evocative. Yeah. People love the term. Let them enjoy it, but it doesn't mean anything.
Indeed. I guess my perspective is I tend to agree with you about the concept, but it's sort of like, well...
Exactly, Neon. I agree with you 100%. But therefore, one other argument might be that we don't even need a Hindu Rajya. We are already a Hindu Rashtra. Maybe we can more Hinduize the Rashtra, but the Rajya needs other corrections, course corrections.
Well, what's the there's something people are reaching for there, and I guess that's what I'm sort of curious about. And maybe that brings us to the next question I had, which was about a remark from Gautam Desiraju that I saw on
Professor Gautam Desiraju, who I have heard checks out my channel every now and then.
Your X account, which everyone should check out, that he said by 2035, I foresee a world that will become the playground of four empires, America, China, India, and Russia, rather than a patchwork of nation states, organic or artificial. And of course, the empire concept of empire is as complex as the concept of civilization. What did you find interesting about that remark?
So first, Gautam Desiraju is an extremely eminent structural chemist, one of the most highly cited chemists in the world. He's either recently retired or he's in the process of retiring from the Indian Institute of Science, where he heads a major lab. And his retirement project is political science.
Yeah. I was about to highlight Sudeep's point, but Shaik makes a very good point about Sudeep's point here. Okay, check this out. Sudeep kahan gaya? Where did Sudeep's point go? Yeah. Sudeep is disagreeing with me and saying that Smritis themselves say that Acharo Parama Dharma, and that many precepts of the Smriti which cause people's indignation should be rejected. So the theocracy which you are talking about is wrong. Then Shaik is saying that Sudeep's argument will annoy a lot of trads today. So bhai bolo, am I uneducated about the scriptures or the trads? Why would trads disagree with Sudeep then here?
Is to get involved. So he's written 2 books now on Indian government reform, and this seems to be the direction he's going with his retirement career. I mainly cited the piece because we've become friends in the reading of my book.
Therefore, Sudeep, Hindu Rashtra kaun banayega? Hum urban libertarians. Trads ही तो बनाएंगे ना? या फिर तुम बिना trad के हिंदू राज्य बनाओगे?
My book, I reached out to him, as I did all the
trads नहीं मानेंगे Sudeep, trads नहीं मानेंगे.
Authors I read, not all, many of the authors I read in writing my book. And his ideas on government reform are really very interesting for India. He would like to see India divided into...
Yeah, I'm happy with what Neon is saying. That's my idea of Hindutva 2.0, a libertarian Hindu state. Okay? Hindutva by default should be libertarian. Stop interfering with Hindu institutions. Hindus have never asked for handouts, except... Oh my God, that statement is so hilarious right now. Hindus have never asked for handouts as Hindus. Therefore, just stop screwing with our institutions. Just stop taking away our dans and making roads and flyovers with it. Let Hindu institutions take care of poor Hindus and let them educate poor Hindus in science, math, and Hindu philosophy.
some 75 states instead of the present 30 something to foster greater administrative efficiency is really his goal. So I am aware of his work and I read his work because I already know him. That said, his comments on the future for empires I disagree with, and I question them in my tweet on it. There's a lot of appetite in the world for the end of American hegemony or the end of American empire, and I've been writing for the last 30 years that it's not going to happen. And I've heard throughout my career that Japan was going to displace America, the Soviet Union was going to displace America, the European Union was going to displace America, now China is going to displace America, then it's the BRICS are going to displace America, and it's just not going to happen. The centrality of the United States in global economic networks is so deeply entrenched, and the lead that the United States has over the other major areas of the world is just so enormous that the pull of the United States will persist at least the rest of this century, and I think probably for many centuries thereafter. I actually wrote a book on this called American Tiansha. Tiansha is the Chinese word for all under heaven. Broadly can be translated as the Chinese world. I use the word Tiansha instead of empire because the United States is not an empire over the rest of the world. It's a strange empire where other countries are begging to have U.S. troops and protest when an American president threatens to withdraw his troops from the imperial possession. So it's not an empire in any conventional sense. That said, it is the leader of a global world, and China has reached its high point and is now receding as a global.
Okay, guys, I have an idea. I'm going to open this up for a debate. Okay, after the 15 minutes remain, we are going to discuss your thoughts on Salvatore Babones and agreements and disagreements. Okay. And so that we can come up with the best question. No, let's do that some other day because I need to really finish that book first, and let's see what are his arguments. We can't learn all of his arguments from one interview. Yeah, fair enough. We won't do it today.
Influence. Its military may be still growing, but China's
remember, think up all the points, and if possible, do read up on the book as well, with maybe our own read along live streams that we are going to do from today, from tonight onwards. Okay. By the time by 25th December when he comes on the podcast. So be as informed as possible on this topic so that you can ask the most incisive questions to him during the live chat. Okay.
Influence. Anyone who's been watching Chinese influence for the last 20 years will have seen a peak around 2020, and it's certainly not what it used to be. Indian influence is rising, but India is still far poorer than China. It's about 1/4 the GDP and GDP per capita. Russia is a regional bully with a lot of nuclear weapons, but I think if you were to assess, for example, the Polish versus Russian militaries in a straight-up fight, Poland probably beats Russia. Right? Russia's no longer the global power it used to be. So, although that rhetoric reflects an appetite among many Indians that we should live in a multipolar world, and I understand the desire that many people have to live in a multipolar world. We don't live in a multipolar world. We still live in a unipolar world, and that one pole is the United States.
Is there any aspiration among Indian elites to, I guess, redraw the boundaries of India? Like, I mean, there's, the Balochistan issue, there's Kashmir issue.
Redraw is an interesting word because on Indian maps, all of Kashmir right up to the Afghan border is part of India. So it's a faux pas in India not to say that Afghanistan shares a border with India, and that's happened in Parliament where somebody, excluded Afghanistan from India's neighbors, and they got a grilling because but India and Afghanistan are neighbors.
Clearly there's a Balochistan Liberation Army.
Balochistan is part of that's in Pakistan. Yeah. So if Balochistan were to become independent, it would be carved out of Western Pakistan. It wouldn't border India. No, there's very little evidence. So there's a little.
Okay, so they are pronouncing Balochistan as Balochistan. So it's becoming Blockistan, right? Okay. I watched a series called Navy SEALs. It's the best series on Navy SEALs ever, other than the movies, of course. 13 Hours, Lone Survivor, American Sniper. They are great movies about Navy SEALs. But the series called Navy SEALs is very awesome. So there, one of the main characters used to call Afghanistan as Trashkanistan.
Bit of talk in India about that India needs, this is very ironic in the era of Donald Trump, that India needs a deep state. America has a deep state, and so India should have one too, and that India should become more imperialistic. And become more like China in pushing its agenda in developing countries. There's very little appetite for though in India. India has always been a status quo country. Of all the many wars it's fought, India has always been invaded. India has never initiated a war, and there's very little evidence of Indian appetite for overseas adventurism. That seems to have died with Rajiv Gandhi, the father of the current opposition leader, Rahul Gandhi. Rajiv Gandhi was prime minister during the worst days of the Sri Lankan civil war and sent Indian peacekeeping troops to Sri Lanka, who quickly became embroiled in the conflict, and ultimately he was assassinated by Tamil assassins. They were Indian, but connected with the Sri Lankan liberation tigers. So that episode, that very bloody episode in Indian history, seems to have ended any idea that India would intervene, even as far afield as Sri Lanka, never mind trying to influence affairs in Africa or Southeast Asia. So the idea that India would ever become an empire, I mean, never say never, maybe in the 22nd century, but not during the lifetimes of people who are currently thinking about anything in India.
That's interesting. That's really interesting, because occasionally there's these references to some Hindu nationalist thinkers who talk about a greater Bharata. I can't remember the exact term, but your sense is that's a very marginal.
There's the idea, but it's fantastical. It's the idea that, for example, one of the great centers of learning and commerce and ideas of ancient India is now in Afghanistan. And, would that ancient city be resurrected as a new Hindu empire in Afghanistan? Clearly not. I mean, this is never going to happen.
Why not, sir? Why not?
Even revanchism regarding Pakistan. There's a lot of nostalgic sort of thinking around, India deserves Pakistan back.
Yes.
But then when you press these opinion makers, well, what about the 80 million
really
Muslims
want to do that?
Oh no, they don't want the Muslims. It's like, well, if you get Lahore, you get its residents. You don't just get the city somehow denuded of all Muslim residents, and there's no appetite in India.
I have an idea. Wait, let me just think about it a little in my mind. Should I even discuss this idea? Anyway, but what I'm saying is that there is a way to do it, right? We have discussed it in our live streams. Simply have different laws for them. So with the why and the exact details of how to stack up those laws, etc., someone must write a book. I'm right now deciding that within the next 10 years, within what year is it? 2025, by 2035, I'll end up writing a book which gives a clear pathway to annexing the entirety of Pakistan, if possible, without having the problems of Islamic terrorism or extremism, okay? And I'll go through all the laws, that if you do this, these are the pros and cons, this is what it will be able to prevent, this is what it won't be able to prevent, then how to take care of that problem. Let's come up with something, because his main criticism here is going to be that yeah, everyone laughs about it on Twitter, YouTube every now and then, a speech here and there that we must have Pakistan back. No one writes anything in detail about it. Let's do it. Let's come up with all the points to make this possible. Because the goal, the main way to do it is we have to not give all the rights to those citizens. In whether we do it in 2 generations or 3 generations, that's the debate we can talk about. Let's talk about it almost every day whenever we come on live streams. But by the time I write that book, we'll have to come up with concrete ideas.
Certainly among Hindu Indians, there's no appetite for reunification of India unless everyone in Pakistan and Bangladesh were to convert to Hindu faith, which is...
No, Anion, इसमें ना स्कीम पता चलने से प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगा. इसमें ये सिर्फ मतलब वो मस्कुलर नेशनलिज्म पावरफुल फुट चेस्ट बीटिंग जैसे करके ही करना पड़ेगा. मगर एक क्लियर पाथवे देने से उसका और भी पॉपुलैरिटी सपोर्ट बढ़ेगा, उसमें डिस्कोर्स तैयार होगा. लेट्स से X person writes such a book. Y person will say that Yes, I agree with you, but the way you are talking about it, the way you are suggesting it is probably absolutely horseshit. Here are my even better ideas how to go about it. उससे जो churn होगा ना ideas का, बहुत बढ़िया बढ़िया ideas निकल के आएंगे, which will be very much executable on the ground, which is we have Pakistan back without having none of its insanities in the country. It is very much possible.
Not going to.
देखो पॉसिबल तो वैसे योगी आदित्यनाथ को डिक्टेटर बना तो वैसे भी वो पॉसिबल हो जाएगा, मगर एक कोहेरेंट, एक लेजिटिमेट आर्टिकुलेटेड आर्गुमेंट तो चाहिए, नहीं तो सिर्फ डंडा योगी जी के हाथ में दे देने से भी वो मेरा डिक्टेटर अलग है प्रॉब्लम हो जा सकता है. तो व्हाई नॉट हैव अ वेल फॉर्मुलेटेड, elaborate, well thought out idea?
That happen. So yeah, these are very marginal, poorly thought through intellectual exercises. Yes, the rhetoric is there, but the rhetoric is it's incendiary rhetoric that has no practical or popular appeal.
Yeah, and I guess one of the reasons I raise it is partly it gets becomes a bit of a slur, I guess, with the whole. It's a bit like your democracy index. These sort of things, get a life of their own in the non-Indian media, and then sort of become representative of something that isn't really.
And look, these ideas do exist, but they're marginal, borderline crazy ideas. And when I say that, try to find, instead of finding the slogan, try to find a book that actually presents the case. There is no book that presents the case because it's a fantastical idea that doesn't have any reality behind it. So you can't even find a firebrand writer who presents this as a thesis in a book. All you find is a quote in a speech, right? Rhetoric on Twitter. It exists. It's certainly there, but it's of no practical importance.
Yep. So my final question is about, I guess, lessons for or issues, let's say, rather than lessons for Australia in its relationship with India. On my Substack on the weekend, I was writing about the issue of migration within and from India, and just check the Australian Bureau of Statistics overseas migration numbers, and there's
sort of. See, this is the churn I was talking about. He's saying you can't have different laws for unified residents of Pakistan. Civil unrest, recipe for disaster. We can let Indian Muslims be the masters of Pakistan Muslims by giving them land grant, let them hand up. Sort of. No, it doesn't have to mean recipe for disaster, and it doesn't have to lead to civil unrest. Whatever the civil unrest, whatever the recipe for disaster, first of all of that can be contained in Pakistan and Bangladesh, in the, what should we call it, the retaken territories of Akhand Bharat, etc. So it doesn't have to come into the mainland with, of course, good law and order. And when the entire, there will be some terrorist attacks, definitely. There will be some rebels from Pakistan and Bangladesh who join hands with foreign intelligence agencies and blow a bomb here and there every now and then. Although I think even though that kind of stuff is probably going to become more difficult and more difficult and more difficult with the amount of privacy we are losing every day. Every move of yours with Digiyatra, GPay is going to be tracked. So moving around bombs and stuff is probably going to be a pain in the ass. It's not going to be the same world 10 years later. And the Indian Prime Minister is not going to be the same with the same powers 10 years later. The Prime Minister 10 years later is going to be a fucking monster, both in the good and the bad way compared to today. No matter who the person, the technology that he is going to wield, the technological weapons that he's going to wield, is going to make these possible attacks and stuff probably impossible. But other than that, we have already had different laws for different residents for the entire country. Okay, we already have caste-based reservations. We have had Article 370. Did that mean that the entire country went to dogs? Yes, you can say that without those laws, without reservations, India would be better off. Without Article 370, Kashmir is better off. Yes, but this one is for a different cause. My suggestion here, Rishabh, would be that keep some healthy distance between from Afghanistan, Balochistan, and just take Pakistan.
The Indian is now the second largest overseas-born group, and will probably overtake Britain in the next year? I
don't think there's a probably about it. I think there's a certain overtake.
I guess one never knows about the future. I always qualify, but yeah, almost certainly the case, and that the history of migration between India and Australia is actually quite long. And are you still chair of the Australia-India Roundtable?
No, the Indian Century Roundtable, and I'm the director, but not the chair. Mr. Maurice Newman is the chair of the organization.
Yeah. So what do you see as, maybe some of the issues for Australia in its relationship with India?
The biggest issue right now is recognition of professional qualifications. There's a lot of pressure on the Indian side for that. You'll notice when we had the economic framework, trade framework agreement, the ECTA agreement, on the Australian side, what Australia wanted was reduced tariffs from India. On the Indian side, what it wanted was visas and recognition of professional qualifications. And that's driven by popular demand. Of course, it doesn't really benefit India that its professional qualifications are recognized in Australia. It benefits Indians who then leave the country. But nonetheless, there's political pressure in India to get that recognition. Beyond that, there is a growing and unrecognized problem that Australia's immigration from India increasingly consists of low-skill temporary visa holders instead of high-skill permanent visa holders. And that transition is very visible anytime you order an Uber Eats. It's also very visible in the university sector. And that will change the quality of the immigration pool coming from India. I don't mean necessarily quality. Well, it will change the quality in terms of high or low quality of skills, but it also changes the quality in terms of how that community behaves. So right now, for example, the Indian immigrant community in Australia is a very, very peaceful group of relatively high-income professionals. If you add in a large number of...
क्या बढ़िया हमारा कमेंट सेक्शन है, देखो भाई ऑलरेडी कितने सारे बढ़िया कमेंट्स आ रहे हैं. चलो भाई ये सब मिलके इसको फिक्स प्रोजेक्ट बनाते हैं, क्योंकि नेक्स्ट जनरेशन में तुम लोग हमारे एज वाले ही तो आर गोइंग टू बी द नॉट जस्ट द टेस्ट मेकर्स. यू गाइज, अ लॉट ऑफ यू all will be big netas and bureaucrats and significant leaders, etc., politicians, ministers, key journalists, all of us who are going to not so secretly have this mission that we are coming for you, bro. Pakistan and Bangladesh, जिसका लंच चूसना है चूसो, हम तो आएंगे ही, हम आ ही रहे हैं. लॉ बना के जिस दरवाजे पे लात मारना है उस दरवाजे पे लात मार के, जिस दरवाजे में पोलाइटली नॉक करना है उसमें पोलाइटली नॉक करके हम आएंगे तो जरूर, आ रहे हैं. जो प्रिपेयर करना है कर लो. We are coming and this is our plan and we are going to prepare for it for the next 10 years.
Low-skilled young people working in dead-end occupations, that has the potential in the future to change the character of the community in a less salubrious direction. It hasn't happened yet, but the numbers being admitted on short-term work visas, in which I include student visas, because a student visa in Australia is a work visa. The numbers are truly enormous, and what that will mean for the future of the Australian Indian community is very hard to say, because we have very little good data about this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Salvatore. Do you want to just maybe mention where people can check out your writing and you comment quite a bit in the Indian media too, and also, of course, give a plug for your book.
Yeah, well, of course, the book I'm promoting right now is Dharma Democracy, How India Built the Third World's First Democracy. A lot of Indians get upset at that subtitle, Third World, and I tell them that first, there's nothing to be ashamed about the third world. It just means the non-aligned world, not part of the US or the Soviet world. But also, if you are ashamed of it, fix it and become a richer country. It's not my fault that India is a very poor country on a par with the GDP per capita of the African continent. So it is the third world's first democracy, both in terms of quality and in terms of when it was founded. Of course, you can get the book all the usual places, Amazon, Booktopia, et cetera, online. You can go direct to the publisher, Connor Court. I think they offer some kind of discount on their website. That's also possible for an Australian audience. My previous book, American Tien Shah, might be of interest to people who have a particular interest in China and China's future and the future of relations between China and the West. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter has, in effect, become an Indian Twitter handle because I have 5,000 Western followers and 120,000 Indian followers. And so I mainly tweet on Indian issues, but you can find me there. I'm very easy to look up and to connect with. And I really love to hear from people. So if anyone wants to reach out directly, just email me. You'll always get an answer.
Fantastic.
Okay, guys, I'll be online for another 5 minutes with this live stream. I'll come back in 15 to 20 minutes with my study along, work along session, whatever. Okay. If you all have any job, if you all are feeling lonely, if you all have any work on a laptop or music production or book reading to do, and you all want to have a group study, join me, because I have to get through Professor Babones' book today as soon as possible, finish that, and then get to veteran journalist Jaggi Bhasan's latest fiction as well. And another book, it's on SIS, that security providing company. Okay. A recent book has come out on that. I think the founder has written it. Even that author is going to, I haven't received the book yet. Oh, I received the PDF yesterday. So anyway, all these authors are going to come into my podcast one after the other. So I need to finish Professor Babones and Jaggi Bhasan's book as soon as possible. Jaggi Bhasan is coming on my podcast on 26th. Professor Babones is coming on 25th. On 27th, probably, that author is coming to my podcast. So let's see. Yeah, I'll have to stretch a little, and we'll take 5-10 minute breaks in between our 45-minute study sessions. I'll be going through the book. Okay, I'll be studying on my own. I won't be talking on the mic much. I'll be checking out the comment section every now and then. Kaam ka yaad dila diya. Yeah, Shudip has good points. Yeah, let's start this churn. इस पे फालतू का डिबेट बहुत हो गया. कुछ लोग बोलते हैं कि लेना चाहिए, आर्गुमेंट ज्यादा अच्छा नहीं है, जब पूछोगे तो उनका क्या करे, उसका कोई आंसर नहीं रहता है. कुछ लोग बोलते हैं लेके क्या करे, which is also a pointless argument. कुछ लोग बोलते हैं बैरन लैंड है, क्या करे. तो भाई पूरा यूएई इजराइल बैरन लैंड पे बना है, क्या कर लिया. हम भी वही करेंगे. स्वाट वैली देखा है, हाँ, तस्वीरें गूगल में, क्या करे स्वाट को लेकर. सब स्वाट में श्री के भैरव बाबा का मंदिर खोलना है. Okay, any more interesting comments? Okay, see you all in 15-20 minutes. Okay, bye bye guys.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে. যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রা নলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে. একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো.